Welcome, guys. This is our third episode of What Muslims Look Like. My name is Ayan.
And my name is Shifa, and this podcast is intended for showing the depth and breadth of the Muslim community's involvement in society. From media to medicine and everything in between, we hope you'll find that there's more to us than meets the eye.
So today's guest joins us from the West Coast in California. Sabah ul-Hasan is a quantitative and systems biology PhD candidate at the University of California, Merced, and she holds multiple degrees, both at the bachelor's and the master's level, in a variety of subjects from biology to chemistry to environmental sustainability. That's too many degrees to even start talking about. She was originally from Salt Lake City, has spent time in New Hampshire, and now is in California. She's, has several different identities she juggles with, some of them being South Asian American, being a Spanish speaker, a Muslima, among others. And she's very involved politically as well. She served as both the MSA president at her master's institution and is currently the first Muslim Graduate Student Association president at UC Merced. So thank you, Sabah, for joining us. We really appreciate it. And I don't know if you guys can hear this, but there's a buzzing sound in the background. I apologize for that. I don't know who let the bees out, but someone did. Okay, anyway.
Save the bees.
Yeah, exactly. Save the bees, exactly, 100%.
We're keeping the bees alive.
Yeah, so Sabah, can you talk about your upbringing in Salt Lake City? That's traditionally a town that doesn't get as much attention in the mainstream as Philadelphia or New York or even DC does. So could you let us talk about your upbringing in that city?
Yeah, so it's a decent city now. I feel like, so when I was growing up, people would say like, "Where are you from?" I would say, "Oh, Salt Lake City," and they're like, "Where is that?" And I would say, "It's in the state that's next to the state that has Las Vegas, which is next to California." That's usually how I would explain where Utah was. But I think since the Olympics in 2002, it's like gained recognition. People actually know that it's a city, that it's in Utah, where Utah is, just general things like that. But before that, so yeah, growing up there, the Muslim community was really, really small. So everybody would kind of come together. So that was a nice pro. Like, of course, the con is like we're very small, but the pro was that, you have Somalians, Bosnians, South Asians, Chinese, Burmese, all coming together to one masjid. Now there's separate masjids. I think there's different masjids where people will speak in Urdu or Arabic or Mandarin, or so it's grown a lot since then. But I would say, yeah, it was an interesting experience. I think it's similar to a lot of people that have grown up in a place where I think most people that have grown up in a place that it's usually the case that they don't want to live there after, or maybe they do want to live there. I think for most people, they grew up in a place where like, okay, I'll try living somewhere else, which is basically what I did. And I think there was some different experience I had too, because first of all, I was Muslim and then also a non-Mormon. So that I think I didn't really notice that because I grew up in the city originally. And then when I moved to the suburbs with my family, that's when it became a lot more noticeable.
So Ayan was reading off a bunch of degrees that you have in the science field and stuff. Could you talk to us a little bit about your passion for STEM, or what is it that attracts you to that side of the spectrum?
Yeah, so I think the short answer is that I'm just crazy, and I just am really excited about learning. I think it's pretty stereotypical for a lot of people that are first generation Americans to be like very educationally driven. And definitely, my parents like classic story where they wanted me to be a doctor, engineer, lawyer, most likely doctor, right? Medical doctor. And I just really like science in general anyway. So for me, I had gotten a scholarship locally at the University of Utah. I had also gotten a scholarship at UC Berkeley, which were the two places I applied. And Berkeley was $200,000 for out-of-state tuition and room and board, which was like, that's the equivalent of a house. So there was no way, even though I had scholarship, I still had to pay that much more or do that much more in loans. Whereas it was a full scholarship at the University of Utah. So I was like, well, I'm going to go where it's free. And with that, they gave the option to basically like you could do a certain amount of credits every semester. And I thought, well, I had done a lot of like general education classes in high school, like AP classes, and I was like, well, like I want to try this out, so I'm gonna make the most of it, right? They're paying for something, so I should make the most of it. So then I had started with biology and like checking out some of the pre-med stuff, realizing like it wasn't really something I wanted to do. I want to do more of the research and the science. Was really excited by chemistry, and then the environmental sustainability studies stuff was super cool because it was a lot more about the policy and philosophy and just different like weird things. Like we took a class on landscape art, which there's like this thing called the spiral jetty, which is a pile of rocks and, in this one section of the Great Salt Lake that this artist made, and it's this big landmark monument that you just go drive out for like 2.5 hours and you see it. So weird things like that, I think, are really informative and kind of put everything together as helping me being like the scientist I am now.
Did you always see yourself when you were a child? Did you see yourself in STEM, or is that something that you just explained throughout college? You figured out.
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Yeah, sure. When you were a child, did you like see yourself in STEM, or was that something that like stemmed from like being in college?
Stemmed from.
I actually didn't think I was very smart. I did not. I really was like a weird kid in that I would go out and our family didn't let us have pets. Like we had like little fish and that was it, but we weren't allowed to have like cats or dogs or anything. And so I would go and collect insects and like keep them in shoe boxes as my pets. And then I would like set them free, and I was like, oh, this is so cool. Like a praying mantis, it's like super weird. Like in retrospect, you're like, that's such a weird thing for like a kid to do. But and I was doing that till like I was a teenager, so I think that like adds another layer of weirdness. But I didn't think I was very smart, and like I did all these AP classes and stuff, and I always thought of myself as kind of average compared to other people in my class. I did pretty well in high school, but I wasn't a 4.0 student. I wasn't a valedictorian or anything like that. And then really what it was, and I was surprised also when I had gotten to UC Berkeley, I was surprised by that. But I think that also just goes to show, like, I think a lot of people you'll talk to that, do well later on in their life, they always are saying that they didn't think of themselves as that kind of person. And I think that's like, it's good to have that humility. Also, like in Islam, like we're taught to have humility and a humbleness. So I think that's also always good. But for what led me to that actually was I was a junior in high school, and one of my good friends, I didn't have many friends, maybe like a couple throughout high school, from my younger years all through high school until college, and I just like started making friends with everybody. But one of my friends, my junior year of high school, she was applying to this program because her brother was a grad student at the campus. And she basically was like, I don't want to be by myself. Can you apply for this program with me? And I was like, I don't think I'm going to get into this program, but okay, I'll apply. And it was a research program. It was a research program for high school students to get involved with research labs. And it was the same pay as me getting a summer job. It was a stipend, and so it was the same pay as me getting a summer job, which I was going to do. And working at Nielsen's Frozen Custard and getting free custard and like going out and having fun with that. And then I got in and had a really good experience. I am actually on a publication now with my first mentor that I had, I think now over 10 years ago. So I think that experience, and then I had really good experiences as an undergraduate. I've had a very mixed bag of experiences since then. And I think really having that strong positive experience at the start like drew me in, because I think there's a lot of parallels with like Islam and science, for example, and that science is really like pushing for people's personalities and their intellect, not for appearance. Like, I have piercings, or, I could go in with my pajamas to work and people will not care as long as I'm putting out good work. Right. So there's still issues with that, but the priority is really on the intellect. So that was appealing, and then that really just kind of kept me in the sciences. And then I had a lot of negative experiences in my high school, particularly with my interest in science. Like I was in chemistry, and I had asked my high school teacher in chemistry, if I was thinking about doing chemistry, and I was really interested in that. And he's like, I don't really know, like basically implying like, I don't think you're that smart. So I think it just goes to show that, when you have people that are around you that are supportive and positive, even if you're not performing necessarily at the best and brightest, that it can push you to that level of being a really good, really outstanding, and having people believe in you and make you do things that you beyond what you thought you were capable of doing.
Well, just chiming in on that, do you think because you mentioned in the email you sent us that you do juggle a lot of identities, right? So you're South Asian, you're Muslim, you're all different kind of things. Do you think you've faced a lot of sexism and Islamophobia, I guess, right? So like, your teacher in high school telling you you're not good, you shouldn't do chemistry, do you think that has anything to do with the fact that you're a girl and like, hey, like go do something that's like quote unquote girly, or like, this, the fact that you were, a brown girl or a Muslim girl, do you think that played a part in it, or is it just?
I think it's very like the thing that's super tricky about it is I would say yes, and I would say the thing that's super tricky about it is it's subtle. And so initially, like when you're in middle school or when you're in high school, like people will say certain things or do. I think especially like around September 11th time, I was between elementary school and middle school around that time for me. So it was like there was a lot of weirdness happening and a lot of comments that I knew were just coming directly out of like me being a Muslim, right? And that was really clear that it was like, okay, this person is saying like, oh, are you related to Osama bin Laden? Because that's a clear like connection there inferring from me being a Muslim. But then there's a lot of subtle things that people will say that you don't know if it's because of, you being a Muslim or you being a female or you being a combination or you being American, first generation American, or, coming from like, I'm the first scientist in my family. Like there's no other scientists in my whole extended family. So I'm the first person to get a PhD in my whole family. So there's certain things that people might say that infer that, I'm coming from like people that are uneducated, and those are the things that I think are much more subtle and more difficult to pick up. So I would say the short answer is yes. And just, I think over time, like now kind of being more senior and hopefully getting my PhD in a year or so, I would say that like now it's a lot easier for me to pick that up. But when I was first starting to get into that kind of stuff and people would say things, it would be really like, wait, is this person trying to infer something? Like what's going, and that can kind of drive people a little stir crazy too. And I think that is another layer that people don't talk about, is on top of like, one example I will say is when I was doing my master's, I know that I was one of the top people to be selected in that program from after I had been admitted, and the person that I was working for had informed me of this. And one of the people that was working with me in the group, they were a year ahead of me, and they were basically, and this was information I mostly kept to myself, and they were basically criticizing me, saying that, oh, you probably got into this program because, of your background, and they didn't explicitly say anything, but it was kind of inferring it, right? And the thing that was super funny, I really thought it was funny, but it was also like annoying, was in the same conversation, they were saying these comments, and then they also had asked for my resume as an example for an application, because they hadn't written a resume for a while and they wanted to use an example for something they were writing up. And maybe they just wanted the resume to like kind of see, even though they already knew what it looked like. But to me, it showed a level of unawareness, like maybe difficulty in understanding someone's self, in saying and doing things that don't necessarily match what they value. So, by them asking for your resume, they're basically saying you're a qualified person. But yet they're also saying in the same conversation, right, that, oh, you probably got this because of your background, right? So they don't even recognize that we're working together, and they're asking for something from me because I am obviously qualified to be there. And I think those are the kinds of things that, we see a lot now coming up more in the conversation of science, and also just representation in general of, am I qualified to be here? Imposter syndrome is a lot more prominent amongst people that are underrepresented than not. And I think it's because of those subtleties. So definitely, yes.
Speaking on the topic of identities, like Ayan mentioned earlier, many exceptional identities, such as like South Asian, Spanish speaker, which you should also, if you would like to talk about where that started from, and just being Muslim, just the other identities that you hold. Can you talk about what it's like to balance like all those different intersectional identities?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, like definitely the strongest one is my Muslim identity, because that's something that's like very personal to me, and that's something that I think a lot of people who experienced September 11th in our childhoods, we can relate to that confrontation of somebody asking us when we're very young, like, who are you? And then you're like, I don't know, like, who am I? And that's something I think for me has always been really personal and like that I hold it really close because, you know, that's something that was questioned about me from a very young age. Whereas people weren't saying like, why are you a woman? Or like, why are you, you know, that wasn't so much a question. So I think that's why it became like a really strong identity for me. And also my family is pretty, they kind of, you know, all of a sudden there's a spotlight on us. And we were all kind of like, well, really, who are we? Like, are we Muslim? Like, do we like being a Muslim? Like, I don't know, because people are asking us all these questions, right? So that's definitely one that I always hold close. And I think the thing that's really funny about that, and especially that ties into this podcast, is at different time points, like different events or social occasions or points of my friendships where I'll be talking to people, I will get comments every now and again that people will say things like, "Oh, sometimes I forget that you're a Muslim," or like, you know, you're not really what I think of when I think of a Muslim, or like things like comments like this where it's like, well, there's over 1 billion people that are Muslim, and obviously we don't look the same, right? It's the same thing when people are like, oh, you don't really look like an Indian, like I'm Indian and Pakistani, and they're like, oh, you don't really look Indian, and I'm like, there's over 1 billion people in India, like we don't look the same, like it's a huge country, it's like comparable to the size of the U.S., like people look so different in the U.S. So I think in the same way, you know, there's all these stigmas of what it means to be a woman, or what it means to be queer, or what it means to be a Muslim, or what it means to be first generation, or like there's all these different things that people associate that they just don't know. And one of the biggest statistics of, like, again, bringing up Islam in general and like Muslims in general, one of the biggest statistics of Islamophobia, people being Islamophobic, is whether or not they just know a Muslim, like personally. And if they do know Muslim, their chances of being Islamophobic go way down. And that's crazy. There's over 1 billion Muslims, and if somebody doesn't know one, then they're like, I don't know, like I don't know if I like them or not. And then there's this other, again, like this other thing of people talking to me, you know, being in Utah or being in New Hampshire, now being in California. I also lived in Puerto Rico for a little bit, which is where I guess the Spanish comes in. I grew up in a Hispanic neighborhood, so that's just something I think, you know, if you're living in America, I think it's sensible to also know Spanish, just because like there's so many people that are Spanish speakers in America. So it's just good. And also I collaborate with people in Mexico. So I think, you know, it's important when you collaborate with people to understand where they're coming from culturally too, and show that respect that way. But I mean, things like that where I was like going on I took a tangent. Now I'm trying to figure out where.
No, that was really helpful.
Yeah, I think things like that where, you know, people are making these comments about, oh, you don't look like a Muslim, and then you kind of like are like, well, I am, right? And then it's kind of like it puts it in their mind, that connection, that, you know, and I think we've seen it a lot in the last couple of years of this hijabi character, right? And everyone's like, hijabi, that's Muslim. And like, of course, like people that wear hijab are Muslim. And there's a lot of people that don't wear hijab that are Muslim. And there's a lot of people that are guys that are Muslim, and they don't necessarily have beards, right? Like they can have tattoos, they can have piercings. Like there's all these different things in between. And it's such a personal, I think, especially, I think a lot of Muslims would agree that Islam is such a personal, intimate relationship that like we're not trying to put an aesthetic to it, right? And then part like they're wearing the hijab or having certain dress codes involved is really coming back to like a personality, right? Knowing us for ourselves as people and not judging each other based off of what we look like, judging each other based off of the quality of our character, right? And if everybody is wearing head covering, then everybody is getting to know each other, right? Not making these judgments based off of looks. And I think these are the things that get lost in translation with all of these like symbols that all of a sudden are coming up in the media of what it is to be a Muslim, which I think is so great that you guys are doing this.
Yeah, I think. Oh, sorry, Anya.
No. I was gonna say I appreciate your comment.
Yeah. I was gonna say, like, I think a lot of people who might be listening to this are people who aren't Muslim, right? And I think a lot of questions that I've gotten personally are like, oh, well, you wear the hijab, and like this other Muslim I met doesn't. So like, if someone asked you that question, what do you think you would tell them, or anyone listening?
That's a good question.
Yeah. So I did wear hijab for a little bit, and my mom also has worn hijab for over 15 years. Both of us didn't start initially wearing hijab, and then we also have family members who were wearing hijab initially and removed the hijab. We have family members that are wearing hijab and already like continue to wear hijab, friends as well. And again, I would say like it's such a personal thing. And I would say the one thing that's really great about my family is quite religious, and at the same time like they're very open, and I think that's important, right? That these things are not mutually exclusive. You can be religious and you can be open, and you should be open. And in fact, I would say my father is the person who is much more like, oh, beta, which is like, the term of endearment for children, like, oh, do what you feel is best in your heart, like these kinds of, and he's praying every day, doing Quran every day, like fasting all the time. He's like one of the most religious people I've ever met. And I think this goes to show that, really someone that is concerned about their faith, they are really doing a deep reflection of themselves. They're not putting that out on other people. They're really concerned with their own character, their own goodness, and what they're doing. And so the response of, I have friends that are Muslim, they wear hijabs, and I support them 100%. And myself, like, I think it takes a lot of courage to wear hijab. And I think that's a sad thing that it takes a lot of courage, because, it is something that I think is something coming from a place of that we're not judging each other for our looks, we're judging each other for who we are. And yet there's this judgment that if you wear hijab, you're like some fundamentalist, or you're shy, or you're like these stigmas, or like you must like be a victim of sexism, or so like chauvinism, or like all these like crazy things. And my mom will get a lot of comments that like, oh, your English is really good. She's like, I grew up in America, basically. Or oh, you're so outspoken, or I love how passionate you are. She's like, I'm just a regular person. Like, why wouldn't I be like anybody else? And I think there's all these weird things about that too. And I've talked to a number of friends of mine too, and I've asked them, what I think is people should think about this, where I said, if I wear hijab tomorrow, if you went back to when we were first friends, would you have been friends with me? And like sometimes they will pause. Like a lot of times they'll say yes, of course, but sometimes they will pause and they'll say, I don't know, and that's, I think, an honest answer and a sad answer. Like this is a discrimination, right? Like we should not favor being friends with people or approaching people because of what they look like. And hijab is another thing of what somebody looks like. And if somebody is representing themselves as, look, I am Muslim and I'm proud to be Muslim, and this is who I am, and I'm doing it for myself or whichever reason, then people should feel just as equally comfortable talking to them as anybody else. So yeah, that would be, I don't know if that's the answer you're looking for.
Oh yeah, no, that's perfect. Yeah.
Well,
totally
one thing that, if I can chime in here for a second, is that, I always say that, when you see me, you can't visibly identify me as Muslim, right? If I'm walking the street, I could be a variety of things. And, one day at our school, we had, wear your hijab day, right? So like non-Muslim girls could wear hijab. And on that day, I decided to don a turban. So I took the headscarf and I made a turban out of it. And I was walking around, and I was a little bit apprehensive of like, what are people going to think about me? Until it hit me that the people who wear hijab, this is their identity every single day. You know what I mean? And it's important
it's a brave thing, and it's a courageous thing. And people should think about that too, that anyone they know that's wearing hijab is very strong.
Well, definitely Shifa is very strong. That is 100% accurate.
Thanks, and I'm sure everyone else is as well.
So
everyone has their strengths.
Yeah, 100%. One thing that I really was happy to hear when I was reading your biography and your resume was that you are the Graduate Student Association president at UC Merced. And I'm actually the student government president at my school as well. So I thought that was really cool. We have the synergy going, the president synergy, the anti-Donald Trump synergy, whatever you want to call it. But in all seriousness, can you, obviously you're very passionate about several different issues. Can you go like a little bit into your political activism and what things you're passionate about, and also where you want to take that in the future?
Yeah, so one thing I'll say is I'm super excited. So UC Merced is a pretty new school. I think we started in 2004 technically, but maybe picked up a little bit later. So it's been over 10 years now. One thing I'll say that I'm really excited about is this year, both myself and the undergraduate student government president are both Muslim women, which is like, that's never, I don't think either of those positions have been filled by Muslims.
And for both of them at the same time. That's
yeah,
great.
so it's super exciting. And yeah, I think one thing and I mean, I'm a little surprised that the campus isn't more excited about this, but I'm definitely excited, and the undergraduate president is also very excited about this. And I think that's something to be celebrated, because this just happened earlier or last year, right, fresh out of Trump era, right? And then there are a lot of results politically around the country of people becoming senators or part of the legislature that are also Muslim or Muslim women in particular. And I think that's really something we should celebrate a lot. Like that is strength, right? So I think in these roles, like, I think the one thing that is a little bit difficult that people don't talk about as much is almost all the Muslim friends I know have taken on some form of leadership role. And I think in part it's because we have to. We are being asked questions all the time. We have to be good examples for ourselves and for other people. We have to be knowledgeable. All of a sudden, people are asking us questions about, what does this excerpt mean in the Quran? Like, let me read the Quran. Let me go back and check that out for you. There's so much weight and responsibilities that I think everyone makes comments that, we have to be these examples. We have to talk about this. But I think people don't talk enough about, that it's an unfair responsibility to other people. It's a strength in some ways that I think definitely, I would say a lot of us Muslim peers, we can definitely say, like, we have developed really good leadership skills, communication skills, conversation skills, how to manage conflicts, definitely. But I think where it is really hard is just taking a moment to step back and recognize that we have kind of unfairly been put in these positions where other people can choose.
Okay, can I ask you a question about that? Because one thing I've experienced a lot is, I'm really happy when someone appreciates, the fact that, yeah, I'm a president, I'm Muslim, whatever the case may be, right? But sometimes I feel like that's all they see me as, right? And what I've always said is, I'm a president who happens to be Muslim.
Right.
I'm not a Muslim president. I'm not here to, implementing Sharia. What is implementing Sharia law, first of all, right? But yeah, I'm not here to do some craziness like that. Have you found it? I think by what you're saying is you find that annoying as well. Is that you're not seen as someone who is extremely talented, extremely well spoken, knowledgeable about several subjects. You're seen as Muslim woman number one. Right, and it's like you're more than just the Shahada.
It's a token. Yeah. It's a token role, and I think your question about Salt Lake City, I recently had a conversation. So in California, it's less common. It doesn't happen as much, especially like Central Valley. There's a lot of people that are Muslim in Central Valley, so it's less common, I think, just generally in California, because there's more people, I guess, to share. But the one thing I will say is, like, it still stands. And the one thing I will say, so like in Salt Lake City, in New Hampshire, in Puerto Rico, here, wherever, I'm pretty much the only Muslim person that a lot of my friends, if not, they just have a couple, like maybe they can count on their one hand. And I think that's grown maybe because of, like, one of us has introduced us to the other, or something like that. But I will say that it can be really frustrating to be a token, and that's something that initially, especially in college, I found I was always being called on, and this is common in STEM as well, where there's all these conversations about, okay, we're trying to promote women in science, and yet we're always calling on women. Why don't we call on the men? Because they're the ones that get to just focus on their work. They don't always have to talk about these things as much as the women do, and in turn, the women, because they're helping with all this other stuff, they don't get to do as much of their work in the meantime. So these kinds of things, and I think same with other identities too, right? So I think with that, initially, it's frustrating to be a token, and I think what I've started to do, at least in the last 4 or 5 years, is really use that as a tool. So now what I do, and you can vouch for this too, because when I followed up with you all, I also included some other names, right? So I say, oh, hey, like, I want to talk to you guys, and also there's all these other people to talk to as well, right? And I think that also, like, we can use it as a tool to share this leadership or this responsibility, and we should do that. Like, I think, for me especially, I was, like I said, like, I had very few friends. I'm obviously, like, very social, very extroverted now. But when I was younger, I had very few friends. I was kind of not antisocial, but like, really like sitting in the back of the classroom, like kind of quiet, more quiet. And really, I think becoming more involved in these leadership roles out of realizing that I need to, not just for myself, but for my family and for my friends and all these other people that can relate to my experiences. I think it also, a lot of times people will talk to me like you're saying, like, oh, like you're the president, or like, oh, like, but you're the Muslim president, and it's like that could be you too. This is how I started. This is how you can get started, and like you don't have to just hold certain identities to be a leader and be a good leader. And I think that's something as us currently as leaders, having these roles, doing this kind of podcast, we can really offer to people and say like, you can just start this by, talking to somebody that you just see walking by and saying, hey, do you want to record a video on Skype and put it on YouTube? Something like that. It can start really small, and that's important. But I definitely agree that it's hard and it can be really frustrating. I think definitely myself and the undergraduate student government president, we both feel similarly that people will sometimes just automatically be like, oh, the Muslim. And it's like, okay, but I'm also a person.
Right.
Like I have other things. Like there's other
you're
things.
More than just Muslim, right?
Yeah. And what again? Like, what does that mean? Like, what does it mean when you're saying, "Oh, the Muslim"? Like, let's have a conversation. Let's have coffee.
Right.
Let's talk about this. Like, I think if you were to ask people when they say that kind of comment, like what the 5 pillars of Islam were, I mean, I don't want to like make assumptions, but I don't think people would know, right? Like when they're saying, "Oh, the Muslim," like what does this mean, right? Like what are they categorizing? Yeah. So I would say it can be frustrating, and I think the way we can go through that, especially like feelings of frustration, or anger, sadness, all of these things, especially heightened now in the last year, like wow, really? Like, like a lot of that, and just channeling that, like I've started to volunteer more. I'm like, well, I could be ranting online, or maybe getting an argument with somebody that's probably not going to change their mind, or it can do something good. And I'm going to do that. Things like that where we can use that energy. And I think, again, like these Islamic values can really help us and remind us, like all these hadiths about Muhammad, Islam, and, people like, and him in the community, and people like throwing things at them when they're praying, or garbage, like putting garbage on them, or spitting on them, or all these things, and they were just still kind and humble, and people would cry and end up converting because of it, right? So we're not trying to convert people per se or anything like that, but it's good for ourselves to be able to work through. It's hard, and it's unfair. It's definitely unfair, but I think ultimately it poses as a challenge for us to become better people ourselves. At least that's how I've been working through it.
No, I think that's a really positive way to go about it.
I can certainly follow up, Shifa. If you have a question, I can go on forever and ask more questions, more presidential, ranting and whining. But what do you have to ask, Shifa? I don't want to interrupt you for that.
Oh, you're fine. We weren't interrupting. I just meant like that's just. I was gonna ask, but you pretty much just covered it right now. I was just gonna say like, how do you, how should we take these like frustrations, and like how sometimes we feel annoyed by being the token Muslim or by being the token whatever. How can we use that energy to do something good or to do something better? But I feel like you did just answer it. But yeah, if you do want to add to that,
Oh yeah, the only other comment I would add to that would be like I think these kinds of initiatives, like projects where there's MIPSTers, there's what a Muslim looks like, there's all these different small groups that are forming, like podcasts or side film series, or just network groups that are forming. I think it's a really great way to just show that we have a presence. I have one of my well, actually what happened was, I think I briefly mentioned in my bio that like I'm really into punk music, right? So like when I was a teenager, I was really into like punk, because it's like the cool thing to do or whatever. But also there's a lot of, I think, parallels with the values of being punk, right? It's like very democratic. It's very I don't want to say like anti-capitalistic, but it's like it's kind of it kind of really promotes democracy. Like it's extremely democratic way of living. It's really trying to get at the ethics of people and putting people accountable. And I think in parallel ways that we have people being accountable of themselves and Islamic values too. So this is something that I thought was really attractive, and also I thought attractive to me as you know, kind of like, I guess, an angsty teenager, but also interested in individuality and just being like acceptance, general acceptance. And I think just one day I had just generally typed in like Islam and punk, and just to see what would come up. And there was this band that came up called the Comenas, and I was just kind of following their work and their music, and they're a little bit radical in some of the things that they post, but it's really just to provoke thought and like get people thinking about things, right? Which is like sometimes you have these things that people say in maybe brash ways, but they really do get people thinking about things in a different way. So it was funny because it was so like classic, where I was at Eid with my grand uncle in Boston while I was doing my master's in New Hampshire, and there I was at the masjid, and then like there's this guy like standing with like his uncle, and I was like, that guy looks really familiar. And it turned out to be the lead singer of the band.
Wow.
And I was like, hey, are you like Basim from the Communast? And he's just like, yeah. And I was like, hey, I really like what you guys are doing. Like, you know, if we can talk sometime, like, there's like this little science communication film series I work on, the Biota Project. And I was like, you know, if we can talk sometime, I'd love to like feature some of your stuff or like have you be a part somehow. You know, I think it's great to like have Muslims involved in this kind of like different ways and just showing different sides of ourselves too. And he's like, yeah, like let's totally. And I was like, oh sweet, like are you serious? Like, are we really gonna like figure this out? And it was great. You know, he was involved with some of our stuff and helped with some of our music for our first episode where we talked about the Central Valley and stuff about I guess a year and a half ago or so. And I think just things like that, you know, where we can really just see like okay, we could like ummah, right, like community, where we can just come together and do things and just promote like and push against those, not push against intentionally, but like just showing other sides besides those stereotypes. And like same with like, you know, comedy that's coming out of like who stereotypically plays in certain roles in film or media, and just people being like, you know what, I'm gonna make my own show, or I'm gonna direct my own thing, and I'm gonna make sure everybody that's involved in it is very included, and you know, create my own space and like include people in that, you know, like making these little micro communities of what we would like to see, and also being able to benefit from that and just like our own growth.
Well, I'm sure you know, like Shifa's a film studies major, so I'm pretty sure you don't have to preach to her about the lack of representation in Hollywood.
Yeah. Film is, there's so much representation needed in film for sure. You already know that, yeah.
Oh yeah.
Go
on, Ryan.
What's you know interesting is, I think you hit the nail on the head right there. Is you know for many years, right, the only way you could get involved in film or the arts was to go to Hollywood, right, or get like CBS or NBC or whatever to you know co-sign you. Nowadays, you know, you can post anything you want to YouTube. You know, Shifa and I started this podcast. I mean, it cost us what, like $20 each to get this program to record, and that was it. You know, and by no means are we, you know what I'm saying, like gonna, you know, make $10 million tonight.
The world, yeah.
Yeah. But at the end of the day, you know, I think you're 100% right. Making those spaces where we can coexist and really thrive, and you know, and show what we're made of. You know, where you know YouTube is very democratic. What's good is good, and what's bad is bad. You know,
the internet can be a great tool for sure, and I think especially for a lot of the countries where Muslims live, right? Like, there's so many. I think that's another thing is like, you know, Western culture is dominated in technology, but that's changing with the internet. You have so many people from all over the world saying, hey, I'm here too. I'm here too. Like this whole thing about like shithole countries. Like I saw this awesome set of clips come up about like, hey, actually, like, here's what's happening in Zimbabwe. Here's what's happening in Kenya. Like, we're awesome. And I'm like, that's amazing. Like, that's great that with the internet, we can just be like, you know what? You're lying. Like, this is false, you know? And you can just say that. You can not, yeah, well, it is a lie. But you know, that you can just use the internet as a tool to be like, okay, you guys think this about certain people? Well, this is the truth. And just show people.
Well, you know, thank you so much for hopping on our podcast and joining us for this episode. We really appreciated you coming, and you know, you were really, you know, well spoken, and you know, we're really excited to see where you're going to end up in the future. Could you tell us a little bit about, you know, what your future moves are, and you know, what you're trying to do in the next couple of weeks, months, years, decades, centuries? I don't know. You know what I mean? What's up with you?
Where you see yourself?
Oh yeah. And then if it's okay, I'd also like to ask you about some questions.
Sure.
So I think so right now I really am just trying to focus on like I really want to complete my PhD studies. That would be great. There's always this like tentative timeline of like I think I'll finish it then, or like I think I'll finish it at this time. So hopefully I follow through with that timeline, which is a year and a half to 2 years from now. And then during that time, I've just been working on these science communication organization type projects. So I work on the two main ones I work on is kind of like this mixed media organization, but the Biota project, where we're just using this in different aspects of environmental justice and symbiotic relationships in science and just like origin stories of like who we are as a team and how we actually started this whole process for other people to learn for like grassroots projects and DIY projects, just going through and pushing through with that and kind of entering these different stages of becoming a formal nonprofit. And then the other main group that I'm involved with is this outreach group, Biotech, where now I've kind of passed on that leadership, and I'm really excited for the people that have taken on that leadership role. We really focus on students, high school students in the Central Valley, in the public school system, especially students that have maybe been a little neglected. The Central Valley public school system is amongst some of the not the greatest in the country, and so we really want to improve like STEM education and STEM, not just STEM education, but also STEM skills. So I think a lot of times people can get deterred from getting involved in science just because it's like, what can I do with this right now? Like, do I need to be in school for like 8 to 10 years before I can get a job? So one thing that we're trying to do with this program is give people skills like in real time. So that way, by the time they are done with this workshop that they go through, they can actually do some small skills for like a lab, or if they wanted to do like sort of science communication thing through film or music or whatever, and just showing that there's a lot of dynamic ways to approach science and understand science, and making science more culturally relevant, I would say, just like, when we look at other things in the news, like listening to a song or watching a video or something like that. And then in the longer term, so I think one thing also I wanted to mention is, especially as a first generation American, I want to just give a shout out to everybody out there who is trying to help their families and support their families while they're in school. I think there's a lot of things that people don't talk about with that or pay attention to with that. And I just want to say, to everybody who might be listening or watching, or you all, it's definitely possible. It's really hard, but it's possible. I'm helping my family with retirement and moving things right now. And that's been a process and a stress. I think there's also culturally a lot of ties to and obligations to family in compared to general American culture. So those are things too that if people have any questions about that, feel free to like tweet at me or something anytime. I'm happy to like talk about that kind of stuff too. So that's kind of the longer term stuff, like helping my family out, getting my own family started, and then career wise, I think just continuing to be awesome and improve on my awesomeness and surround myself with good people. I think really, really the best thing I've done for myself is just surround myself with people that are that like I look up to and respect and think are awesome. And they've just filled me with ideas and energy and motivation, and to just sincerely, know that they're happy for me and I'm happy for them. And that's just led me to be a better scientist. It's led me to be a better communicator, a better Muslim, a better person in general, just understanding things in different ways all the time. So I think longer term, I'm aiming to be a data scientist. And what that means is mainly working with a lot of databases, whether that's more like public, like things that you might see with like elections is a common example, like 538 is a common example of a lot of data scientists involved with that, or more like scientific databases that scientists use. We'll see what that future holds, but those are things that I would really like to be involved in and aim to be involved in, and hope to utilize in a way that's beneficial for communities too. I think it would be great to like have, to go out to people that, families where English is their second language, and just be like, here's code, like do whatever you want with it. And they can just use it as a tool for their own communities. And just having that be a way, as you're saying, to distribute equality and equity in areas where, they're previously neglected. Like the neighborhood I'm from, we did not have anyone coming to like talk about science where I was. And that would have been great to have. And I think a part of that is just that, there wasn't any scientists living in that area. and so scientists somebody might more generally be interested in helping the area that they're more immediately from than going out of their way to help another area or be involved in the area. It's also can be challenging because sometimes you don't want to like go to a community and be like, this is what's good for you. You want to be respectful of those communities too. And I can see, especially with all these conversations about privileges, that people are really wary of how to go about that and like stepping on toes and making people upset, which is reasonable. I think they should really think about those things. So yeah, those are kind of the longer term things that I hope to just keep doing that until I fall over, basically.
Inshallah, you achieve all of them and
Inshallah.
more.
Amen.
Also, if anyone else wants to continue to follow your journey or get in contact with you for anything that you may have said, or just to get to know you more, where can they reach you, follow you, any of the above?
So the best way, I'm starting to go more into the Twitter world. The best way is probably on Twitter. You can I think my name will be in this link, so you can just type me and find me on Twitter, and then like you can get other information to contact me through that. Probably just comment on something or message me or something through that. I think there's a way to like get my email or something through there too. That's probably the best way. And I don't know if there's time to ask you some questions as well, or
sure, yeah.
Like you guys are wrapping up.
I don't have a life, so it's fine.
Yeah, you're totally fine.
I just wanted to ask you, so it seems like you had a lot of interviews this past weekend and that you've gotten a lot of good interest on this. And so I just wanted to ask you kind of two-part question. One is, what was your original intention and like interest in getting this started? And what are some of the things that you really like been pleasantly surprised about since doing this?
That's a great question.
Shifa, I think you got this. You got this.
Oh my gosh.
You got this.
Well, I think for me and Ayan, I think it's just like trying to get our story across to a majority of people. And just like I think we both have had experiences or friends where like they don't necessarily know like they have one idea of what it looks like. Not just our friends, but like majority of people with the media and just like things like that in general. So what we wanted to do was try to like combat that by just showing literally what a Muslim looks like by trying to get a bunch of different Muslims on this podcast and just know like who they are, what they care about, what they're passionate about. Not just like, oh, this is like a Muslim. It's just like this is a Muslim, but this is actually like who they are. Like beyond just like the fact of their identity as a Muslim. And what was the second part of the question? Oh, what you're pleasantly surprised with? I think for me, just by like the 3 interviews that we had like right now, including you, just like the diversity of subjects of fields. Last week we had like a hijabi in the NFL, like that's insane.
Yeah,
and
that
now we
was
have you as a scientist with just an amazing line of just like work that you've done and the work that you're continuing to do, which is absolutely inspiring. And then the first the first group that we had was like Olive Theory, and like they're creating amazing work on like YouTube of just like trying to connect with their Muslim identity and like just the brown culture out there. And they also have like a podcast of like what's called Strange Flavors, right, where they like get a bunch of like brown people and say like, oh, what was it like when you came back with a report card at home?
It's not even just brown people. The cool part about it, what they're doing is it's brown co-hosts, but they're focusing on anyone and everyone. So it's even broader than that, yeah.
Which is incredible. So it's just we wanted to do something similar, just like this is what it means to be Muslim, and just hopefully like when people watch it, they'll be able to see like, oh wow, I never thought a Muslim is someone like X, Y, and Z. Like you look completely different than I do. I look completely different than the girl last week does. And just like hopefully the more guests we get, the more like people will inshallah be able to like get their eyes opened.
And the whole point is, I think the reason we chose the name what Muslims look like is almost like kind of, I don't know, like paradoxical, right? Yeah, or ironic, right? Because Muslims don't look like anything. There's 1.6 billion Muslims in the world, right? You look different than I do, and we're all kind of South Asian, so we look differently than African Muslims or East Asian Muslims or whatever the case may be, Hispanic Muslims, for example. And I think the coolest thing that I've found is the support from the community. Where like I remember when Shifa and I first posted this, like people were hitting us up heavy, like hey, like even before we posted our first episode, just like we posted one little short little like photo or something like that, yeah, one blurb, and I had people reaching out to me thanking me, and I'm like, listen. And what I tell people all the time is, even you're talking about being president or whatever, right? Is, I'm nothing special. Shifa's nothing special. You're nothing special, right? We're all just regular people, right? Just trying to make the most of what we have. And at the end of the day, anyone's watching this that thinks that they can do what we're doing right now, that's complete nonsense, right? Because
Right.
I can guarantee you that if you're watching this right now, you're probably a better speaker than I am anyway.
And
So
me.
I think really the biggest thing that I want people to take from this podcast is not even what Muslims look like, whatever. Just I want them to be inspired to do whatever they want to do. You know what I mean? And if that's opening their own podcast, that's awesome. If that's I don't know, starting an art gallery, or that's making a film, or that's going to med school, whatever it is, that's
Or getting
dope.
involved in science and STEM.
And the whole point is, let's forget about the stereotypes. Do what makes you happy, because life is way too short to be doing things that so and so has bestowed upon you. At the end of the day, put yourself on. So I think that's kind of why I love this project, and I'm so glad that Shifa and I are actually cousins. So that's how we met initially, right? I guess we were born 4 days apart, so there's that.
Oh, great!
Yeah.
Actual day one.
I'm the older one.
But yeah, she's the older one, yeah, and the better one too. So, but yeah, that's kind of
one more.
Sure, yeah.
One more thing that I was pleasantly surprised about was just like the feedback that I got from my friends who aren't Muslim. Like they're extremely excited and like they're so passionate about just like listening to the podcast, and I'm so excited to hear that, just because like it's one of the intentions, apart from like the other things that like Ayan mentioned, was just to get them aware, because sometimes people like may have a Muslim friend, or they're like kind of afraid to ask them, or if they can ask them questions, and like hopefully like if they are listening to the podcast, they can tell like firstly that like we're completely open. Like hopefully if you have a Muslim friend, they're open enough where you can go and talk to them about like if you have questions about why they wear it or why they don't wear it. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, that's like one of the other things that I was pleasantly surprised about as well.
One story I'll just kind of end on, I guess, is
sure.
So there's a lot of these stories I think we can relate, and one particular was I was like definitely like someone told me that I was the only Muslim that they had ever met, and this was during my master's studies. They didn't know of any other Muslims besides me, and they didn't tell me this until like a year after in our friendship. And they sent me a message kind of out of the blue, and they were like, "I just want to let you know that you're the only Muslim that I've met. You're the first Muslim I've met, and I would initially I didn't know what to think, because a lot of my family actually says things that they're kind of like I guess Islamophobic is what they were saying, was that their family members were like would make comments, and that they actually kind of agreed with that initially too, and then they realized that in their own time of getting to know me, but I didn't know any of this until like a year after, right? So and in the getting to know me, they said, I just want to say that making friends with you like has really like opened up my eyes a lot to what I've thought before, and I'm really glad that I like gave myself a chance to do that and learn, and like just realize that you're just a regular person basically. And I was like, and they're like, I hope you're not offended by this. I'm like, no, I'm like so touched. Like this is so
That's
sweet,
amazing.
and I really appreciate this. And the one thing that I did, I didn't know anybody when I moved to New Hampshire, like anyone, and I moved to the first thing I did was I moved into this house and I rented the room from this like middle-aged woman like in her house. And so I was living with her, just like me and her, and she was older. And then the rest of the block was Pathetic, kind of like in their early 50s, 60s. And it was Ramadan time actually. And so one thing I did was I just decided to just go, and I'd heard like I don't know mixed things about like New Hampshire, and I like didn't know what to think. I decided to just go and put flyers on everyone's door, inviting them over for Ramadan. And I'd asked my landlord / roommate about it. Of course, I was like, "Hey, like, is this okay? Like, could we have people over? Like, is this alright with you?" Like, "Oh yeah," she was really open to it. I was nervous how she was gonna be, but she was super excited about it and really open to it. And it was funny because her son came, and her son and I are the same age. And her son was like, "This is like not gonna work. Like, there's not even alcohol here. Like, what? Like, there's like no one. This is New England. Like, nobody's gonna come." And I was like, "See," and I like went like it was like a cul-de-sac. I knocked on everyone's door. I'm like in my like mid-20s, and like doing this like I'm like like a little kid going like trick or treating or whatever. And people came. Like it was at least half the neighborhood that came. And the thing that was I think the most powerful about that was a lot of the people were saying, like we haven't had something like happen of just like people getting together in the neighborhood for like I think over a decade. So that was I think really big, and they were just excited to just like check out something new, and that somebody had just kind of put themselves out there to like invite people to something new. and also to just get together, right, and see like who the other neighbors were. So I think this just is a way to show, and like nobody was Muslim like at all. I think, and we all like ate, I like explained the dates and eating the dates and like drinking the water and everything, and they're like, and we all had a great time. So yeah, like I would just say, don't be afraid to try things as long as you feel comfortable. You're not doing anything too out there, type of thing. But and don't be afraid to talk to Muslims. Like we're happy to talk to you.
Oh.
That's amazing.
So on that uplifting note, thank you so much, Sabah, for joining us. We really appreciate it, and we hope to have you again soon, and can't wait to keep up your journey.
Yeah, likewise. If there's anything I can ever help with, let me know.
100%.
Yeah, the list you gave was fantastic. Thanks so much. Of names.
Thank you, and have a great night. I hope you don't have to stay up so much later.
No problem. You too. Good luck with everything.
All right, guys. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamualaikum.
Take care.
Okay.